Hello and welcome. It's 11 a.m. India time or 5:30 GMT. First up in news just coming in, the Supreme Court of India has agreed to open court hearing on the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Act. Remember, Dalit groups yesterday protested across India, alleging recent Supreme Court order that has diluted the provisions of this act. That's the news breaking here on WION this moment. The Supreme Court of India has agreed to open court hearing on the Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe Prevention of Atrocities Act. Remember, Dalit groups had yesterday protested across the country, alleging dilution of some provisions of this act. All right, joining me live from the newsroom is my colleague Mohammed Saleh. Good morning, Mohammed. What more details do we have at this point in time?
Absolutely indeed, Ramesh. Good morning to you as well. Now, in the light of the protest that we saw yesterday, where at least about 9 people ended up losing their lives for the first time. Dalit protests have always, by and large, been very peaceful. For the first time, what we saw is that these Dalit protests have taken a recourse to violence. 9 people lost their lives, which has made the government sit up and take notice and address the issue in a much more serious manner. We're given to understand that the government has requested the Supreme Court to in fact listen to this case at 2 p.m. today. However, the Supreme Court has not given a date and time on which this petition is to be heard. Now, at this point of time, Ramesh, the fact of the matter is the protests and the grievances of the Dalits, these need to be addressed. Now, the straw that has broken the proverbial camel's back is of course, the dilution of the Prevention of Atrocities against the SC/ST Act. This is what has brought a lot of the Dalits onto the streets. But the fact of the matter is the grievances are run much deeper than this. And also the government at this point of time is also recognizing a fact that if this is an issue that is not addressed by them immediately, what will happen is that more such protests could be seen. What we saw yesterday is thousands of Dalits, and this was not restricted to any one particular city or state. We saw protests that took place in Rajasthan, in Uttar Pradesh, in Madhya Pradesh, across several areas in Bihar, which have not been witnessed, at least in recent memory. Now, what was in fact put forth by the Supreme Court in its ruling, in its earlier ruling, is that, that some of the provisions of the prevention of the SC/ST Act were in fact being misused. So they wanted to bring about some corrections into that. And this was something that was not viewed very, there was a sort of a grievance that was addressed by the members of the SC/ST community, but it is not just restricted to the dilution of the prevention of atrocities against the SC/STs, because the grievances of the SC/STs run much deeper than that. And it is this recognition which has prompted the government to now try and address this situation in a much more rigorous manner.
Indeed, Mohammed, do stay on if you will. I want to bring my viewers up to speed with the latest news coming in the Supreme Court of India, which has decided to have an open court hearing on this matter. And as Mohammed Saleh was saying there, the government has requested the court to hold the hearing at 2 p.m. later this afternoon. That is about 8:30 GMT. But the court has said that the Chief Justice of India will decide the date and time. So that's where things stand at the moment. But the court has agreed to have an open court hearing on this matter sometime today. And for those who are just joining in, this is the news we are tracking here on WION this moment. The Supreme Court of India has agreed to open court hearing on the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Act. Remember, Dalit groups had yesterday protested across the country, alleging dilution of the Supreme Court order against certain provisions of the SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act. All right, Mohammed, if you're still with me, we saw a lot of violence across the country yesterday. At least 9 people were killed in the violence. Are we hearing anything about the abatement of violence, the continuing protests across the country today?
All right, at this point of time, Ramesh, there are no instances of violence that have been reported, because remember, this also has now become a bit of a law and order issue, and this is where the government has seriously woken up. It is not just the fact that the Dalits are out protesting, it's also the loss of lives, arson, and also the loss of public property that was witnessed, that has jolted the government into action. Now, there are some quarters of people who are in fact saying that this is all being done in the name of politics. But at this point of time, it would not serve anyone's purpose to look at these protests only from the political prism, because there are grievances which need to be addressed. The Dalits have put out their demands in a very black and white manner, and this is something that the government needs to now wake up and take stock of, because at this point of time, the issue of the dilution of the prevention of atrocities against the SCs and STs is, like I said, the straw that broke the camel's back. Because the atrocities against Dalits, this is what they have complained time and time again, that the amount of atrocities that are in fact reported, these have gone up in recent years, and this has happened in certain specific states. And they've also said that even in cases where complaints have been made, FIRs have been lodged, eventually it all ends up in a person being let go of scot-free. So the conviction rate in instances such as this is abysmally low. This is another of the major grievances, and also something that the SC/ST groups have in fact pointed out is the lack of representation. Now, despite the reservations, they say what has been happening over a period of time is that the Dalits are being excluded from important positions where they were earlier represented, and now they're saying that, look, we are slowly beginning to see a certain pattern in which we are being excluded from being represented in these important places where they say that they need a representation, be it in education, be it in terms of government, be it in terms of civic society. Now, all of this, they say, increasingly conditions are being created where they are being pushed out to the fringes and margins of the society. And this is what, the anger that we saw yesterday, which just exploded onto the streets yesterday. The government now has its task cut out. The first thing that it needs to focus on is to try and ensure that law and order is maintained. And apart from this, there needs to be a reconciliation and a reaching out process to many members of these Dalit communities who have put forth their demands. And also the Supreme Court has agreed that yes, it will be hearing a petition by the government on the dilution of the Prevention of Cruelty Against the SCs and ST Act, but the date and time of this has not been decided. The Attorney General Venugopal, we are given to understand, has requested that the case should be heard at 2 p.m. However, the Supreme Court has not agreed on a date and time for hearing this case.
Right, Mohammed, do stay on. I'm now joined by my colleague Jessica Taneja from outside the Supreme Court of India in New Delhi. Jessica, good morning. We are given to understand that the court has finally agreed for an open court hearing on this matter. What the latest you are able to pick up?
Yes, Ramesh, and the Apex Court has said that it will clarify whether it will be heard today at 2 p.m. or not. Let's understand that even yesterday this was taken up. The review petition was filed around 1 p.m. The press conference by the Law Minister took place around 10:40 a.m. And post that, the review petition was filed, and we know what the review petition had said. We also discussed that yesterday during WION dispatch. But it's important to understand that AG, the Attorney General K.K. Venugopal, says that there is an emergency situation in the country. Thousands of people had come on roads to protest against the judgment. That is necessary to stay, and there is a necessity to stay on the operation of the verdict to maintain law and order. Now the Apex Court says that it will try and reconsider that. Now, Ramesh, when a review petition is listed, it is not necessary that it will be entertained until and unless it is on a necessary urgent basis. So, as we knew, even yesterday, Attorney General K.K. Venugopal had, told us that yes, it will be brought before the Apex Court early in the morning to mention, and after that was brought, the Apex Court has finally said that it will take it into consideration, but there is no surety whether it's listed at 2 p.m. But AG said, let's hear the review petition at 2 p.m. because of Bharat Bandh, because of protests happening across the country, apparently claiming 9 lives. So this is an important pressing issue. Now, given this circumstances in mind, we'll have to wait and see whether the Apex Court takes it into consideration and hears it at 2 p.m. Now, let's also understand what else is happening inside the Supreme Court. The court is currently has constituted a bench which has been hearing the Aadhaar case for a very long time. Now, that also will get disrupted if this hearing takes place, because that is the usual routine on Tuesdays and Wednesdays to listen to the Aadhaar issue, which is also another pressing issue. So will this issue also take some sort of precedence over the existing issues? That one will have to wait and watch.
Jessica, let's break this down for the WION viewer. What can we expect to happen if the court indeed begins hearing the matter at 2 p.m., is it purely a legal matter from here onwards?
Well, Ramesh, because see, this is a review petition against the Supreme Court order, which was given out on the 29th of January. If you understand the nuances and the details of that order, that order said no automatic arrest will be made under the SC/ST Atrocities Act of 1989, and replacing that with a 7-day preliminary investigation into the arrest that will be made by the police, setting up fast-track courts, setting up special courts to examine these cases, and wherein the alleged charges of the marginalized community and the SC/ST community and the Dalits is perhaps that this dilutes the whole act, which has been in existence. It has gone through amendments years after years, first in 2002, 2005, 2010, as recent as 2012. So given that particular instance in mind and the record that suggests, the Supreme Court might revisit its verdict because it's a fundamental right of an individual guaranteed to everyone under the Constitution of India to file a review against any judgment the Supreme Court or any courts, as a matter of fact, in the country give out.
And also very quickly, Jessica, what does the government say in its review petition? Is it arguing for a change or amendment in the rules applicable in this case? All right, try to fix that.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm told Jessica is back with us. Carry on.
Absolutely, Ramesh. That's important to point out as to what the government proposes to do in terms of challenging that Supreme Court order. So what exactly does the review petition say, and what exactly is a review petition? Let's point that out to our viewers. A review petition can be filed when any individual or any institution or organization wants to review the order given by the courts. That is called a review for the courts to review their order and to precisely point out what does the government say in that review petition. The government says the judgment of 20th of March, which entails wide ramifications, the order deserves to be recalled by the Supreme Court. It also says the judgment suffers from errors on the face of record, and I'm all quoting from the judgment here, the petition here. It also says the Honourable Court has failed to appropriately appreciate certain facts and settled principles of law, also pointed out on behalf of Centre. And it goes on to say that the judgment has wide ramifications and implications resulting in the delusion of stringent provisions of law enacted under the 1989 enactment. It adversely affects a substantial proportion of population of India being the member of SC/ST. It is also contrary to the legislative policy of Parliament as reflected in the POA Act of 1989. Therefore, we as petitioners or review petitioners, the central government, seek hearing of the review petition in an open court. So that might take place today. So these are briefly the pointers from the long review petition that has been given out by the Centre to the Supreme Court here.
Right. So as Jessica Taneja was pointing out there, the government filed a review petition yesterday in the Supreme Court of India. And the Supreme Court has now says that it will hear the matter in an open court hearing sometime this afternoon. The Chief Justice will decide the date and time of that hearing. But the government has requested that the hearing be held at 2 p.m. this afternoon. All right, we'll keep coming back to Jessica as the day progresses for more on this developing story, but we'll keep track of this as we go along.